all of our three hugs today. This is a joint HubSpot user group for the Twin Cities, manufacturing Midwest, and fractional leadership. So whether you're a fractional connecting up with folks in manufacturing or a HubSpot user in the Twin Cities, welcome. And this is going to be super fun. I am Dave Meyer. I am joined by Jen Meyer and Michelle Stinson Ross. We're all with BusyWeb, and we are a HubSpot partner that believes in the power of education and doing good things for the community. We kind of bleed orange, and so it was a natural extension for us to manage these groups. You're going to be delighted with the content that we've got here about lead scoring. And if you've got those questions, again, go ahead and log those in the webinar chat. And Yoel, thank you so much with Growth Driven Solutions. And he's got them. Yep, you can still audit the webinar even though you're not with the Twin Cities, whether you're a fractional or a manufacturer, or if you just found us in the Hug directory. We love to connect, and this is about just furthering the HubSpot community. So welcome and thank you. We are at the top of the hour, Jen. So should we get started?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's go.
Well, welcome everybody to today's hug. We are going to be talking about lead scoring in the age of AI. The goal here is how to identify, high intent buyers faster and try to use your HubSpot portal to take away all that manual work for lead scoring and to help out both your marketing and your sales teams. And if I click in the right area, it's going to go to the next slide. So our agenda for today is going to be, we're going to look at, we're going to introduce ourselves, of course, and talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about benefits, AI versus traditional lead scoring, uh, the pre-work that you should do before you do the lead scoring in your portal, and then how to create those lead scores. We're going to go then into some potential automations that you could do to help out your sales team and take some of that manual work off. Uh, go into some Q&A, and then yeah, we'll talk about what's coming up in the next month with the HubSpot user groups. If you have any questions at any time, please drop it in the chat. We will get to those as soon as we can. So our hug leaders today, I mean, Dave's here and he's pretty, but we're not going to have him talk about it. So I am Jen Meyer. I'm one of the owners of BusyWeb. We run the Twin Cities Fractional Leadership and Midwest Manufacturing Hugs. Um, uh, I have been doing CRM installs for over 20 years and been a HubSpot partner since 2017. And I am joined with Michelle Stinson Ross, who is on our team for HubSpot operations. And she's going to help us talk through the lead scoring benefits and all of those kinds of things as well as we go. She's also monitoring the chat for me. So. All right. So by the end of this event, our goal is that you know how to set up your AI tools. We're going to also set up the lead scoring and then create some automations. This won't really be workshop style, but we're going to give you the instructions just so that you know how you can do that and, get everything done on your own. Some requirements. Requirements is a harsh word. I don't know that I call it requirements. Well, some of them are. The portal type is a requirement. So to get the lead scoring tools, you are going to have marketing or sales hub professional or enterprise. That's where those tools reside. The AI enablement tools should be enabled in your HubSpot portal. Lead scoring does not take credits, and we will say that multiple times. However, it does rely on some of those AI tools to be set up within your portal for it to work properly. And then some just helpful certifications that you can get from the HubSpot Academy. Marketing Hub software and Sales Hub software certifications do cover lead scoring within them. So go to the HubSpot Academy and you can see those for free and get certified in HubSpot. All right, so benefits of lead scoring. So how does lead scoring help you? This might be like a 101 for you guys, but if you guys are new to lead scoring and trying to get leads warm for your sales team, or at least let them know who they are so they have to do less work, Lead scoring is really the assignment of a score or value to each lead that reflects how likely they are to become a customer. Uh, Simple, period, next paragraph. So when you need this, little small entrepreneurial companies, I mean, you don't really need this. The traffic that you're getting in all of your, from your forms and all, your marketing probably isn't generating enough leads to necessitate lead scoring, but it is kind of fun to have. So if your sales team has more leads that they can respond to in a timely fashion, this will help them to prioritize those leads. If they waste time on low quality leads that don't convert, if you need to know how great is this customer, is it really in my target market? I mean, if they're getting 10, 15 leads a day, ideally at least, then they're going to want to know how to prioritize those. Um, Also, if your sales reps, if they don't have a strategy, again, for who to prioritize in the pipeline, and if the closing rate is lower than you would like. So, usually bigger companies pay attention to close rates. We want to make sure that we are keeping your sales team engaged with the right contacts at the right time. So, a few statistics about the marketplace. 53% of salespeople think sales has gotten harder in the last couple of years. So, markets are tightening due to economic uncertainty, and higher interest rates and things like that. So, people are more hesitant to buy. This makes the salespeople work harder for those deals that they do get signed. 27% of leads sent to sales are actually qualified, which means 73% of them are not. So let's give them a hand and help them out. 30% of There is 30% false positive scoring from manual models. Back in the day, we used to use an ABCDF, scoring system for our leads, and nobody could ever really tell us how somebody became an A, right? Nobody could tell us why they were an F other than maybe they had a Gmail address, right? So we want to make sure that we are taking the guesswork out, putting the parameters in that we really want to look at to, get solid scores. And then 70% of a customer's buying process is done before you talk to a prospect. That's a big number. So, we want to make sure that, they are researching before they ever want to talk to you. So let's figure out what they're researching. That's going to help with one of the scores we're going to talk about today. So let's focus on growth. All right, AI versus traditional lead scoring. HubSpot's legacy lead scoring was sunset in August of 2025. The field is still in your database if you've had your portal longer than that. And you will see this big yellow banner at the top of it when you go into that field. It is the lead score field at the contact or company level. Um, I'm really kind of happy that this is sunset. Honestly, to be quite frank, it was kind of a pain in the butt tool. The reason why is because you had to pick specific things. Like, for example, if you wanted to know if someone clicked in a marketing email, you couldn't just say clicks a marketing email. You had to pick the email. And if you had multiple emails that you wanted to track, you had to have multiple things, multiple actions. Some people liked that. Those of us who do a lot of marketing out into the marketplace, that was really kind of a big pain in the butt. Also, it was really hard to maintain over time because everybody's going to forget to add it. So it's clunky, it's outdated, but now we have two options, really three options. So HubSpot has instituted a fit score and an engagement score, or you can have a combination score. So what's the difference between the two? The difference between the two is the fit score is who they are. So this is demographic based. It's going to work off the property values and it changes very slowly or not at all.
Mhm.
So it's going to look at, Michelle, you have a lot of experience with this. What are some of the things that it's going to look at?
So the things that it's going to look at are qualities about people that you want to talk to as well as companies. So a fit when you think of an ICP, an ideal customer profile, depending on your business, your customer might be a person or your customer might be a company. And the fit score enables you to dial in things about both companies and contacts that fall into this. So again, especially anything that when we're talking about a company that's a fit for our business, that information rarely changes. So in the case of fit, we would be looking at number of employees, annual revenue, location of the company. Those are things that basically define a company's fit for your business.
Or industry too.
Right.
Hmm.
And those are not things about the company that are going to change, likely. I mean, once they're in business and they're established, that information about them is not going to change. Um, Demographic information, when you're talking about whether a person is a fit for your business, now you're looking at um, job title. Now, granted, for people that does change over time, but the fit as to is this job title meaningful as part of being part of a buying group or something like that, that parameter doesn't change, even though the people rotating in and out of that particular role might change. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me.
Mhm.
The engagement score is a little bit different. It's really what they've done. So it's looking at actions and interactions that they're doing on your website. What pages are they visiting? What are they engaging with your marketing, your emails, your advertising, your social media, things like that. So it's giving scores to those things. You get to pick what those are as well. So it's looking at activity and timeline data, and it's going to be changing constantly. And one of the things that we want to do is we make sure that it decays over time. Because if they stop engaging with us, we want to know that.
Mhm.
And we also want to be able to act on that. So maybe putting them into a remarketing campaign or something like that based on that decay, just to entice them to come back and, hey, we have something new for you. So, what tools do we need to set up prior to getting our lead scoring going? There's really just two. The first one is your data enrichment in your portal. We want to turn this on. Now, data enrichment no longer costs credits for you. So that's it. Woohoo! They brought it back.
Yay. That's a good
So
thing.
they charged us for credits for a bit, and everybody was like, no, 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 time out. So you can find this in settings and data enrichment in the back end of your portal. What we want to make sure to do is we want to make sure to turn on various things that you want to have automatically enriched. If the data is not in HubSpot, in your portal, what it's going to do is it's going to say, I don't know what industry or what the annual revenue of this company is, or whatever those fit score parameters are that you've put in. It's going to not know that information, so it's not going to score it.
Mhm.
So, and relying on sales, and for those of you who are salespeople, I'm just going to apologize, but salespeople really don't like to fill out all the fields in there, and they might not know the information. So let's let the portal do the work for us and automatically update those things.
I
Um,
will toss in something just to give you guys some historical background on the data enrichment. So, what is driving Breeze data enrichment is the acquisition of Clearbit. For those of you that know what that company is, Clearbit was acquired by HubSpot, and it is all of the things that Clearbit developed that are now feeding the data enrichment for Breeze. And I will say, from what I've seen, because we not only use the internal enrichment, we've also seen how that compares to like enrichment from Zoom or Clay or any of those other types. It's very similar.
mhm.
Um,
It's gotten better
yeah,
over time.
yeah.
It kind of fell off for a bit, and then yeah. So there's several things that we want to do. We want to, on this main screen, we of course, and we will go into this and do a little demo with it, but we want to make sure that we are turning on those enrichment fields that we want to track. In conversational enrichment, we'll look for changes to records and if you want to update those or not. And then in the mapping section, you can also say what field you want things mapped to. So that becomes really handy for, it gives you some control. You can also say if you don't want stuff, uh, to update automatically or not. So. And then we also want to create our ICPs. Now, this is in the marketing brand data sources section. We will also go into a demo for this.
Hmm.
But adding those to your system, helps to identify those attributes. It's also I mean, you're going to need this if you're going to use any of the AI within HubSpot. So this is kind of a primary driver to get those things done. You can also have multiple ICPs. I think we have 7 in our portal, maybe 8. But for different things, different areas of business have different target markets and things like that. Making sure your ICPs are solid, is going to help all of the AI run in your system. Now, one of the things that you need to know is ICPs can be different than personas. They can be tweaked. And so maybe your persona is, like for us, it's a marketing professional at a company who, needs to get some help with digital marketing or maybe their CRM setup. My ICP, I might have 2 or 3 different ICPs for different job titles within
Hmm.
that realm or different management styles, different sizes of company, different, company target markets or
Right.
industries. So you might have more ICPs than you have personas at the end of the day. But especially if you're going to start using the agentic tools within HubSpot, we want to make sure that these are set up.
Hmm. I
So,
think the one thing, if you don't mind me
of
calling
course,
out one thing about the ICP, if you look really carefully at what it's asking you to fill out, yes, you've got a profile name, you've got locations, but look carefully. There's business type, there's industry, there's company size. If it helps you at all, the ICP, the ideal customer profile, is a blend of persona and company. It encompasses describing both an individual that you want to reach out to as well as the company. So that's kind of the distinction. It's a blend of persona and company.
great call out, Michelle.
Hmm.
All right. Well, let's see how this works. All right. I need to go over to my other demo. So for data enrichment, can you see my screen? Just
Yes.
making sure. Okay. You never know what happens when you're going to hit that escape key. For data enrichment, what we want to do now to get to this, you go up to the settings gear, and then down here is data enrichment on the left under the data management menu. We want to go in here and look at, automatically enriching new records. So it's going to fill empty properties with company domain, contact email, things like that. You could just toggle those switches on. Now, a super admin can do this. Not everybody can do this. So if people can't do it, you want to talk to your admin about getting permissions
Hmm.
for that. Continually enriching the existing records is a good thing to do, so as people move jobs, as people maybe company revenues change or, things like that, we want to make sure that we're continually updating those.
Yeah. If I may call out the fine print, so pay attention to what it says down below there. This updates previously enriched records with new
Right.
data.
Yep.
So if you've only enriched maybe a part of your database, it's not going to keep continuously updating things that are new. It's only going to continuously update something that you've already enriched at least once. So
Got it.
it's something that you have to kind of pay careful attention to.
hmm You can also say if you want it to overwrite the incorrect enrichment values. So not that it's going to put incorrect things, but if it has changed and the system sees that, you can toggle those switches on. Um, The next one is automatically enriching recently engaged contacts. So as you know, it's not going to, scan your whole database all the time and look for changes. It's going to look for who you're engaging with and, how often and things like that. Those are the ones, basically it's kind of like when you want to update the content on the top 10 pages of your website, you kind of want to do the same thing within your portal because if you haven't talked to someone in 3 years, do you really care if something has changed with them? So we want to turn that one on. And then you can opt out of free company name enrichment. So what that is HubSpot will not set the company name field when new companies are created. You get to decide if you want that on or not.
And it's
Um,
really helpful when you think about if you're doing business with something that is a franchise, that it has a headquarters and then it has multiple other locations. You want to be able to distinguish between the satellite locations and the main headquarters. That's a good reason to not have it enriching company names.
Great call out. For conversational enrichment, what that's going to look at is email contact enrichment. So it's going to look for I believe, isn't this? No, that's the extraction from email. So it's going to keep the contact properties up to date, looking at changes from logging in your portal. Now, the new contact extraction from email is really looking at signature lines. The signature boxes for the people that you're emailing, if they have a LinkedIn in there, if they have a phone number in there, it's going to scrape those signature files to add that information to the database. And then the return to office date detection. If somebody has an out of office on or something like that, there's a field now in HubSpot if you have this turned on where it will automatically say these people are out of the office for the next week so that your sales team doesn't waste the time if they're not going to be around. And then if we come over to mapping, you can sort this right over here by contacts or companies, but basically you get to say if there's an enrichment property that's going to be updated, you get to say where it's going to go and what the overwrite rules are. So I could check, if I don't care about state region code, I cannot fill in any of those values. But I can say if I want to overwrite existing values or not or if you just want to fill in empty fields. So you get the choice on how much enrichment you want and how far you're going to let it go. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is ICPs. So, where you find this is if you go to marketing and brand at the bottom of the menu, this is going to be in the data sources section. Now, just a little plug. You want to make sure this whole brand voice area is completely filled out. And that is not a small task.
No, it's
If
not.
you're going to use the AI within your portal, this is the main place that it's going to go to get your tone, your personality, your, everything about your company, mission statements, terms to avoid and make sure that the context is beefy. You don't want to write one sentence anywhere in here. You want to write paragraphs of how you want your
Mhm.
company portrayed. But it goes into customer sentiment, competitive landscape, content themes, tech stack, social responsibility, all of that kind of thing. That is going to help make your AI work better for you at the end of the day. And we will go into this in depth in future hugs as
Yeah.
well.
I will say, just as kind of an expectation setting, I recently did this with a client, and it took us 2 sessions for sure to get through like all of the brand identity, and then a third session's, really focused on ICPs. So it took us several rounds of conversations to really get everything set up right for one of the last clients that I did this with.
Yeah, that's wonderful. For data sources, if you click on the data sources area, that's where you can access your ICPs. You can also put your company profile in there and the products and services that you want to track.
Mhm.
This products and services will not pull from your product table. So if you're using your product table. So this is really more higher level products and services that you want to use in the AEO settings and other places in AI. So if we click on ICP, um, you can have multiple ICPs in here if you want to create a new one, or if you want to, edit any of these, or you can delete them. These are not preloaded in your system. These were created by us. So you can edit them and come in here and make whatever edits you want. Or if you want to create a new one, you just click the orange button on the bottom. It has required fields of name and location. And when they talk about location, what they're talking about is country, really, is what they're talking about. You can get further down that rabbit hole, further down here in as you build it. So
Mhm.
add a description, business type, that's a text field. So you can, give more context to that. Job titles is also weirdly a text field. There's nothing in here. So, but it looks like it's a drop down. So you just, if you type your answer, hit enter, it's going to take that as the answer. So if I want to type in, you know, uh, VP, you also might want to put vice president,
Yes.
just because we want to make sure that AI is going to pull all options of what's potentially in people's signature blocks or titles or anything like that.
Mhm. Think old school keywords and make sure that you're not typing in a long comma separated list, but you're typing in a term, hitting return, typing in another term, hitting return.
Yep. Um, all of these are just the same as that. So, like, what interests do those people have? And I'm not talking about do they like to play golf. What I'm talking about is, what are the things that are driving them to want to work with someone like you? What are they interested in, maybe business wise? What are their pain points? Industries, again, we just want to type those in. Ideally, they match what HubSpot brings over, but it doesn't have to. The HubSpot list is over 200. So we want to make sure that we're at least somewhat close to that.
Mhm.
Company sizes does have ranges, and you can pick multiples of these. So if we want to work with, basically, companies with over 50 employees, we would just, select up until we get to the employee range of that we're comfortable working with. Same with revenue ranges. Revenue ranges you can pick if, I want to work with basically up to a $500 million company. I select all of those. And then, you can always take them. If you start going up market, you could take off the lower ones later if the ICP is the same. And then age ranges, this is broken out into about 10-year ranges. And so, really trying to narrow in on who that target ICP is. Once you have all of that in there, the save button will turn orange, and then you can save that ICP and go on to your next one.
Would you do me a favor? I want to show them a sneaky little trick I used with
Yes.
ICPs. So back into and pick one of the first three
Okay.
and scroll all the way down to the bottom. Oh, they changed it on me.
That happens a lot.
They used to have an open text at the bottom of this option that I could actually provide additional context. I could talk about specifically about pinpoints. They've changed it on me again. Thank you so much, HubSpot.
It's a daily struggle.
Whoops.
All right. So let's go back to our slideshow. Okie dokie. So, how do we create those lead scores? So we want to plan ahead. There are a few best things that we need to think about as we are planning out what we want to do. You know, we can put a cap on what the score can be so it doesn't go above a certain number. This makes it a lot easier for sales to be able to determine, okay, this is, high, medium, low priority lead for us. If they don't know what the cap is, they don't know how to grade it, because if it
Hmm.
says that it's like, it's a 99, but that's out of 1,000, then that's much lower than if it's out of 100, right?
Hmm.
So best practice, let's keep it easy. Let's make the cap 100. Um, High intent actions get the most points. Somebody who fills out your request a quote form. Let's just put them at the top. We want to make sure that sales responds to that ASAP. Demographic matches should get moderate points, maybe 10 to 20 points, depending on what those demographic triggers are, unless they're really, really important to your business, right? So we want to make sure that we're really only scoring what we need to. We want to subtract points for negative signals. If you like, we get a whole bunch of like college students downloading white papers or ebooks from our website to learn things. I don't want to sell to a college student. They're not going to buy anything. So,
Hmm.
so we're going to give them negative points. Or maybe if you're a B2B business and somebody is filling out your form with a Gmail or a free email address, let's give them negative points as well. Competitor domains. Let's just exclude those. You can exclude your top three if you want.
Hmm.
We also want those engagement scores to degrade over time. We want to make sure, and you get to pick the time frame, and you get to pick how much they degrade. We've heard best practice be 20 to 30% if there's no engagement within 30 days. That's kind of the, rule of thumb. You might want to make that 90 days. Maybe your selling cycle is longer, and you need to account for that. We also want to mark them as SQLs automatically when their fit and engagement score gets to a certain level. We'll talk about that in the automation
Hmm.
section.
Right on. While we're talking about this,
Hmm.
Corey reached out and asked specifically, like, um, what are some practical examples and best practices for, and the reason why I'm calling this out now is this is part of the list of the best practices, Corey, is that this is kind of the starting spot. And I will say best practices get you started, but they will not get you across the finish line.
Right.
Lead scoring is one of those things that is incredibly custom to your business and how you interact with your customers.
Hmm. So we've put some examples in this template. If you guys request the slide deck, you can use this as a template if you want. So for example, things that the attribute where you match the target industry, that would be part of the fit score. Suggested points for you. We want to look at company size potentially, maybe personal email, that would be part of the fit score, but that would be a negative score. If that's in, one of the things you want to look at. Competitor domains you could exclude from your fit score. A demo or meeting request, I would give that high marks. That
Hmm.
would be part of your engagement score because they're actively engaging with you. You're downloading a case study or a guide, probably lower points than that, but I want to know how many times they've downloaded guides. Maybe it's been
Hmm.
multiple things that we've produced on our website. If they visited your pricing page more than 2 times, maybe we give them some, extra points for that. But if there's no activity for 30 days, we want to make sure we add that to our decay. Now, these values are just suggestions. You don't have to do what we recommend. These are just kind of standards that we've seen in the industry. If you only have 100 points to work with and, in your selling process, marketing, you know, uh, marketing engagement is less important than demographics, then you can have a much smaller set of data that you're pulling to give those scores. So some things to do. Decay your engagement scores. 30 to 50% after 30 days. That's kind of the industry standard. We do 30%. I've seen people do 10 or 20 because they really want to hold on to those people. Sometimes you got to set it, see how it works, and then come back to it. In like we recommend every 90 days, go back to your lead scores and just make sure that they're still working for you.
Yeah. A sales cycle is important here. Like if you're a consumer product, then degrade them 50% after 30 days. That's not a long sales cycle. But if you build custom equipment for manufacturing companies, that's a really long sales cycle. You don't need to decay your stuff quite so quickly or quite so much in a short amount of time.
Mhm.
So it should align with how long your sales cycle takes.
Yeah. We want to make sure that we know your cap. Make sure you communicate that to your sales team. They need to know what the cap is, otherwise they have no context. Also, knowing your ICP and demo or firmographics, we need to have that. And then train the team. Spend a half hour
Mhm.
with the sales team. It doesn't have to be as hugely in-depth training. They don't need to know every single parameter that you're looking at necessarily, but just run them through how it's built so they understand. Then they'll know what to give credence to.
Well, and that's also an opportunity for them to sanity check. So they're the ones that talk to potential customers a lot more. They'll be able to really help you dial it in as well.
Hmm. What do you want to avoid? Michelle, go.
Oh my God, please don't score people for email opens.
Don't
And
ever
I know
email
it's
open.
like I know people are like, wait, what? But don't email open rates indicate that I've got good deliverability? So what we see happening in the industry just writ large is the more that AI is coming available to help filter people's inboxes and Apple in particular is using this quite a bit, where Apple kind of pseudo opens the email to scan it and make sure that it's not like um like it's problematic. They want to make sure that they're scanning it for viruses and things like that. They're also scanning now for just like junk email and solicitations. Like
Well, and
what we're
also
seeing in
for their privacy settings. You're
right
not going
for
to know if they do it
privacy.
or not. So,
So we're seeing a lot of instances now where the open was actually the bot on the behalf of the user, making sure that privacy has been maintained, all those sorts of things. So those email open rates aren't really telling us a good enough story to use it as a lead scoring
mhm.
signal.
And one of my soapbox moments, and that some of you may have heard me talk about this before, if you're looking at, email clicks would be a much better way, a much better metric for you to use. And in the new tools, you don't have to pick specific emails.
Hmm.
But as you're looking at your email statistics and analysis, don't look at the click rate, look at the click-through rate, for God's sake.
Hmm.
Click rate is a bogus metric and it looks really low. And it's not that click-through rate is high. Click rate looks at how many people did you send divided by how many you clicked, where you can't click something if you don't open it. So click-through
Right.
rate takes your open rate divided by your click rate, which is a much more accurate metric. Sorry, soapbox done.
Oh, we could soapbox on the things to avoid all day long because visiting just any old page, no, because let's think about the purpose of why they're visiting. And I'll go back to your example of college students, right? College students will hop on a blog in order to learn something or produce a paper, or especially marketing students. We love you students, but yay.
Yeah.
Enjoy the blog and leave the rest of our pages alone. But that's just it. So a blog read, while oh good, you're at least interested in the topic, that doesn't necessarily indicate that you're ready to do business with us right now. Whereas let's look at the pages around pricing, around the team. I loved it that that was something that you mentioned to me earlier today, Jen, was that we pay attention when somebody opens up our team page.
Mm-hmm. Because they want to know who they're going to work with.
Hmm.
Or your portfolio page, or maybe they visit a couple of services pages that you have or product pages that you have, like in succession, and you can decode all of that within LeadScore within the new tools. Oh, and here's your last soapbox, Michelle.
My absolute favorite. Not every form fill is qualified, especially the contact us page. Do you know how much time I spend putting up stuff to filter out solicitations, bots, all the sort of things on the contact us page? It's almost to the point where I don't even want a contact us form anymore. It's so
Mm.
useless.
Yes, yes. All right, so how do we build these? These are, I didn't do a lot of slides for that. Oh, and of course, I'm not going to be able to, there we go. Okay, toolbar over toolbar. All right, so to get to the lead scoring tools within your portal, if you go over to marketing, marketing and then lead scoring, just towards the bottom, you can start from scratch or you can use AI. AI is going to use that ICP that you have. Otherwise,
Mhm.
starting from scratch, you get to pick and choose kind of what you want for parameters. So if I start from scratch, you have your options here if you want to do your engagement score, your fit score, and also if you're looking at contacts, companies, or depending on your portal, potentially deals. Deals is only going to let you do a combined score. But contacts and companies will let you do all three. Now, if we uh, start with the fit score, and you have contacts highlighted here, it's going to look for associated company attributes as well as contact attributes.
Mhm.
So just know that you could do a company only one. It kind of depends on if you use your portal to focus in on companies or contacts more. That's kind of where it applies.
Yeah.
So if we click fit score and we click create, you're going to want to name it up here. Now, one thing we learned, whatever you name it here is going to be the property name in the back end, and you can't change it. So please, if you're doing like, demo test, at the end of it,
Whoops.
that is going to be in your property name. So just know that. So, okay, so then we go to criteria, we add our property group, your score limit. This is where you set your cap. And you can pick, from ranges here. Again, we really like to do negative 100 to 100. Everybody understands that grading cycle, so that just makes it easier for people. New scoring group, you can have multiple groups that are getting scored within one fit score. So maybe you have a contact section, maybe you have a company section, or if you wanted to combine that, you could. So we are just going to do contact fit here. Um, Add your group limit. You don't want it to go over 100. It's going to default to whatever you have up here. Now, score limit. So there's a difference. Score for groups, you can have one group be maybe 50 points, and then your second group could be another 50 points, and that will total up to the top score limit.
Hmm.
So maybe we do 50 points here, or maybe you want to do 70-30, or something like that, just to give more weight to certain criteria. So for contact fit, if I could do associated companies, deals, tickets, notes, things like that. I'm just going to stick with contacts. And then we can search for any property. So maybe I want to do email address. Um, is maybe it's invalid. If they give us an invalid, um, email address is equal to true. So then I want to subtract maybe 10 points. They give me a bad email address. I don't want to talk to them. Maybe that's 100 points for you.
Hmm.
That could be whatever you want it to be. You can also add property criteria or segment membership criteria to any of these as qualifiers as well. You can also add conditions. So you can say it's an invalid email address and they've unsubscribed or something of that nature. I can just X out of that if I decide I don't want it. I can also add more properties here. So if I want to look at title,
Job title.
hmm,
Yeah, job title.
yeah, is equal to any of or contains exactly, we can, contains any of. I like contains any of for this because sometimes, if we're typing in VP or vice president, or maybe it's CMO, director. You have the option. Oops, director fell off. I didn't hit return. You can score any of those. If you put multiples in here, you can score them individually, or you can score them as a group. So if I say that this is going to be 25 points. That would be if they're any of those things. But if I want to give vice presidents or maybe CMOs higher scores than directors, then I could score it individually and I could say how many points I want each individual one to have. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. If I wanted to do an associated company, this could be in this group too. So maybe that company industry is any of, and then I can pick anything from 250 options. They give you a lot of options. You can do multiples, and it wouldn't be an and, it would be an or statement. So, and then you can give them the associated amount of points.
Mhm.
If you wanted to, oh, sorry, Michelle.
I was just going to point out, depending on how you set up your enrichment defaults to using this property of in the industry checkbox. So this now you begin to see why the enrichment is important. If you've got a whole bunch of companies that the industry is blank, it's not going to be able to score it. So use your enrichment, have it fill in that value, and then you can score it against what's in there thanks to your enrichment. So that's where those dots connect.
Nice. You can also add another property group, like I said, if you wanted to do a 50-50 for different attributes or 70-30 or something like that. Maybe you give the associated companies more weight than the contact information. You really get to design this how you want to. All right, so when we are all done, we need to save this. Click save up here at the top, and then I can, of course, it's going to have problems saving the score. All right, so, well, it wouldn't be a live demo if we didn't have an issue. So, of course. All right, well, I'm just going to exit out of it, but that would be my fit score. Now, if I wanted to create an engagement score, very, very similar things. I just want, again, you could do contacts, companies, or deals. I found that engagement works much better with contacts because they are the ones engaging, not the companies. So if I click create, I just want to show you some of the parameters that you can put in here. It's all based on event groups. So if we go to the event group, again, you can name your group, you can give it score limits, you can have multiple groups. So maybe people who go to your events or that you got from trade shows score, excuse me, higher than other contacts that you're scoring. So this is where your decay score is. So if I want to decay scores, I can reduce it by whatever percentage you want every time period that you want. So you get to pick, and then, like Michelle said, really based off your sales cycle. Some of the event criteria that we're going to look at, a lot of these are the marketing tools. This is why we need marketing and sales to talk. So your ads, your calls, your CTAs, documents that sales sends, feedback from the surveys, form fills, integration events. If you have Zoom Info or Apollo or Clay coming into your system, or maybe a different integration from an app, you want to make sure that, that might be one of the things that you want to score people on. Intent signals, do they hit multiple pages before they leave that you want them to hit? Um, marketing emails, marketing events, yes, in email. Open is a thing. Please don't use it. Media, meetings, that would be one-to-one meetings. Messaging, if you have SMS turned on, page visits, sales emails, payments you receive, segment membership, sequences, SMS, social, workflows, so many options. And it gives you, like, for example, if we do, if we pick a sequence, you can say if the sequence is finished and then you click the little abacus next to it. And maybe you can say which sequence it was, when they were enrolled, who enrolled them. You can say is any of, and maybe you pick your sales team. That can all be options. And then you can say, okay, if they finished and a meeting was booked, then I want to give them a score of X, and you can really kind of tailor in what those scores are. Then they mean something. and we want them to mean something. All right. I ran through that pretty quickly, but I want to be cognizant of time. We have a couple more things to cover with like automations and things, so I want to make sure and get some questions if you guys have questions.
Yeah, so far everybody's going, thank you, got it. This is really helpful.
Oh,
Craig
fantastic.
says, nice overview.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
great.
it's like
There is
it's a little
also,
quiet,
if
but
anyone wants to join us and like literally chat with us, you can just raise your hand and we can activate you to talk. So if you'd rather talk instead of type, feel free. But we'd love to have you with us. This is great. I learned a ton. And I don't think, well, I didn't think that I knew that as much as you guys, but holy cow, that was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All
So
right, so
raise your hand if you
automation
want to talk.
automations if you want to notify people and make sure to mark people correctly in your database based on the fit score or any of the scores that you're creating. So one of the ones that we have turned on that we actually learned from another partner is life cycle stage update, rep assignment, and notification. Some people do this as separate workflows. Really, you can just do it in one. The image here has kind of how that workflow would be. Now, one thing that we learned with this, so basically, you got to determine what scores mean something. When you want something to be an SQL and you want sales to follow up. Now, remember the sales workspace leads area, you can automatically make people a lead if they are an SQL with an owner or whatever lifecycle stage you determine they should be going to sales and put on the lead board. So we have it set so if the fit score is greater than 60 and the engagement is greater than 50, we can use that as the enrollment trigger to set the lifecycle stage, assign a rep if there's not a rep assigned, and then notify them. But we learned something when we turn this on. If they are already a customer, we don't need to queue sales to follow up necessarily. So we just want to make sure that we put a little branch in the bottom to say, okay, these are SQLs. That's what we want to notify sales about, as opposed to just everybody who fits those scores. Because hopefully your customers are visiting your website and engaging with your things. So
they kind of by default as customers actually fit that score.
they totally do. So, yeah, so we want to make sure that we put that branch in there. Lesson learned. Also, if the engagement score decreases, we talked a little bit earlier about maybe doing a re-engagement campaign. So, if the engagement score was, above 50, but has dropped to maybe below 20, then maybe we want to try to entice them with a drip campaign. Let's send them to a couple of blogs. If we know what they were interested in, which hopefully you marked in your database via workflow, if you know what they were interested in, why don't we send them out more marketing materials? Let's send them out, things to try to just get them to come back. Please come back. So I put a base workflow here, just a template for what you potentially could do. Delays, looking to see if they're making meetings with our sales or if they clicked a link in an email or something like that that shows that they're engaging again. All right. And at the end, we typically put people in a segment for review. If they're not going to re-engage with us, over maybe a 2 to 4 week period, then let's put them on a list. Let's have the company review them for potential, deletion, archiving, whatever.
Mhm.
Do we want to keep them in our database? Some say yes, some say no. It really depends on your business.
Because those marketing contacts are highly valuable. We don't
They
want
are.
them wasted.
They are. All right. I want to give an option now to, ask some questions. If you guys have any questions, happy to answer anything about lead scoring that you might have. We'll just wait a couple minutes and see if there's any questions that come into the chat.
Sure. Um, Dave, if you're there, you said you learned a lot. What was the one thing that was remarkable to you that you learned?
Yeah, I think it was most things not to do. So, the when we're going through with clients, a lot of times, especially on the contact us form, people are going through and they're attaching the details to it or, attaching scores. And oof, yeah, thanks for that because it's not, yeah, you just gave me more ammo to say, yeah, you don't want to,
Well, one of
landing
the things you
pages
could
and
do
real.
to combat that, we have in our lead status field, we added solicitation or bot to it. Excuse me. You could use that as a negative criteria if
Hmm.
they're marked that way. Hmm. Sorry, I'm losing it here. The allergies are terrible in the Twin Cities today. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions, so I just want to be cognizant of time. We do have a couple more things to cover. That is the end of our presentation. However, um, I did want to let you guys know HubSpot had a change in software, which is why it's taken so long to get Hugs up. It took us a while to learn it and figure it all out. We do have LinkedIn groups for the 3 Hugs that we manage. So scan or either use the URL, scan the QR code if you want to join those. You do have to request to join. We don't want just anyone in there. We want to keep it topic central. So we will be sending out emails for Hugs coming up as well as posting them in these LinkedIn groups. It's also a great place for you guys to ask questions if you do have questions. So we're gonna make sure that everybody has that opportunity. Our next hug is going to be on June 18th. We're going to do an office hours. Our goal is to help you solve your HubSpot puzzles. This is not something that everybody wants to go to, but if you are running into issues in your HubSpot, it's things that just aren't working the way you want them to work. We're going to have 3 of us on and we can help to answer your questions, give you best practices, things like that. So really open discussion time. So we would love to have you at that. That is June 18th at 11 a.m. Central. And then in July, we are going to do Beyond the Lead Score. So using HubSpot to capture real-time buyer intent. So this is going to kind of be, class 2, the 201 class of your lead score is set up now what, basically. And so that will be on July 9th after the 4th at 11 a.m. Central as well. If you go to any of those Hug chapters at the events.hubspot.com website, we have events planned through October. So please look at what they are. We're going to offer office hours almost every month. If now is not a good time for you, you can always come in the future if you do run into something. But we're going to go through until inbound happens or unbound. Sorry, they changed the name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all of the product announcements from Unbound, and we're going to wait to schedule more hugs just to see what they come out with. So that's going to determine our topics for the future. Also,
We
in those LinkedIn groups, if you have ideas for topics or things you want to learn about, please post them in the LinkedIn groups. We would love to hear that, or in the community chat on the Hug chapter page. So
do we
those
want to
are
throw
all
out
the
a
options.
tentative save the date, Jen, for our in-person in Twin Cities?
In the Twin Cities, we just found out this morning, we are going to do an in-person hug for setting up the prospecting agent. It's going to be a 2-hour workshop, and the goal is that you're going to have it set up by the time you leave. There will be a few prerequisites that we're going to ask you to do just to make sure that your AI settings are turned on and all of that kind of thing. But that will be an in-person event. That is not on the list for everything in the Twin Cities Hug chapter yet, but that will be lit up probably by next week. And you'll start seeing marketing about that.
Also, pro tip, I could tell you right now, having set up your lead scores based on what you saw today and setting up your buyer intent, which is coming up fairly soon. If you've already done those and you're can make it in person in the Twin Cities, you're already going to be ahead of the group.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for your time. We do really appreciate it. We have my email address. You can also visit our website, busyweb.com/support. If you do have HubSpot issues that you need troubleshooting help on, please let us know if there's anything that we can help with. But we will hopefully see you next time at our next hug. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.